The rain pounded against the windows of St. Mary's Hospital in Detroit. It was 2:37 a.m. on a freezing Tuesday in March. The emergency room functioned at its usual pace of controlled chaos. Ambulances arriving, patients groaning, monitors beeping in a disjointed symphony of medical emergencies. Dr. Sarah Mitchell was finishing suturing a deep wound on a construction worker's arm when she heard the first scream coming from the reception area. It wasn't an ordinary cry of pain or despair. It was pure terror. Sarah immediately dropped the surgical forceps, her still-gloved hands stained with blood. Her body reacted before her mind could fully process it. Muscle memory from 6 years serving in combat zones in the Middle East. She knew that kind of scream. She knew what it meant. Deadly danger. Marcus Donovan surged through the automatic emergency room doors like an out-of-control tank. His 2.13 meters of height meant he had to slightly lower his head to fit through the entrance. His broad shoulders completely blocked the passage, but it wasn't just his size that was terrifying. It was the fury in his eyes, the foam at the corners of his mouth, the blood dripping from his wounded wrists. And above all, it was the 30-centimeter hunting knife he brandished in his right hand as an extension of his own hatred. "Where is she?" he roared, his voice echoing off the hallway walls like thunder. "Where is my wife?" Jennifer, the 23-year-old receptionist in her first month on the job, recoiled behind the counter, her body trembling uncontrollably. She tried to speak, but no sound came from her throat. Marcus lunged toward the counter, knocking over a wheelchair in his tracks. The metal slammed onto the floor with a crash that sent everyone in the waiting room jumping from their seats. "I know you're hiding her," he yelled again, the muscles in his neck twitching like ropes. "No one takes my wife away from me. No one." 3 hospital security guards ran towards him. The first, a 6-foot-tall man who had been a police officer, attempted a verbal approach. "Sir, you need to calm down," and Marcus turned with surprising speed for someone his size. His free arm shot out like a piston, striking the security guard in the chest with such force that the man literally flew 3 meters backward, slamming against the wall and sliding to the floor, unconscious. The other 2 security guards stopped immediately, reassessing the situation. In the corridor leading to the emergency rooms, Sarah observed everything through the small reinforced glass window in the door. She had seen men under the influence of drugs before. She had faced enemy soldiers and crazed combatants. But there was something particularly disturbing about the combination of size, strength, and chemical fury that Marcus represented. His brain was already analyzing the situation, categorizing threats, calculating angles. "Doctor, we need to evacuate the patients," whispered Daniel, the head nurse beside her. His hands trembled as he held the communication radio. "No," Sarah said calmly, her eyes never leaving Marcus. "There's no time, and he's between us and the main exit. Any move will trigger a violent response. So what do we do?" Sarah didn't answer immediately. She was counting Marcus's steps, observing how he slightly favored his left leg, noticing how his right hand, the one holding the knife, trembled microscopically. Methamphetamine, she concluded, probably mixed with something else. The perfect combination to create superhuman strength and zero judgment. In the waiting room, Marcus had grabbed Jennifer by the collar of her uniform, pulling her halfway over the counter. "Last chance," he hissed, his breath hot and acrid with chemicals. "Where is my wife?" Sarah closed her eyes for a second, just 1 second, and I was back in Afghanistan. 2019, Advanced Combat Base in Helmand. She was 28 years old and on her 4th deployment. An explosion had destroyed part of the base, screams everywhere, wounded soldiers, and then through the smoke she saw a massive, crazed enemy combatant running toward the medical tent where 3 wounded American soldiers lay helpless. She had only seconds, no weapons, just your training. Sarah opened her eyes. She was back at St. Mary's Hospital, but that moment in Afghanistan had taught her something crucial. Size isn't everything. Rage isn't everything. Drugs aren't everything. Technique, timing, and absolute. Determination, that was all. "Call the police," she told Daniel, her voice firm and calm. "And prepare trauma room 2. We're going to need it." "For whom?" "For him." "No," Sarah said, already walking towards the door. "Not for the security guards, he's already hurt, and possibly for me. Dr. Mitchell, you can't—" But she had already gone through the door. Sarah entered the waiting room with measured, deliberate steps, not running, not hesitating, just walking with the confidence of someone who knew exactly what she was doing, even when everything inside her screamed to run in the opposite direction. "Let her go," Sarah said, her voice cutting through the air like a blade. Marcus turned slowly, his eyes taking a moment to focus on the doctor's small figure. When he finally registered her presence, a hoarse laugh escaped his throat. "Who are you?" he growled. "The heroine of the day?" "I'm the head physician of this emergency room," Sarah replied, keeping a distance of about 5 meters. "Far enough to have time to react, close enough to be taken seriously, and you're scaring my patients and my staff." Marcus released Jennifer, who immediately collapsed behind the counter, sobbing. He took 2 steps towards Sarah, his shadow engulfing her completely. "I don't care about you or your emergency room," he said, each word dripping with venom. "I want my wife, now." "Your wife isn't here," Sarah lied softly. She knew exactly where Mrs. Donovan was, examination room 4, being treated for severe facial bruising and a fractured rib. "But even if she were, you wouldn't be allowed to see her." Marcus's face darkened, his nostrils flared. The knife in his hand gleamed under the fluorescent lights. "You're lying," he hissed. "And you're high," Sarah replied calmly. "Meth probably mixed with PCP, judging by how dilated your pupils are. Your heart is beating at least 160 beats per minute. You're sweating despite the low temperature, and you're approximately 15 minutes away from a heart attack if you don't calm down." For a moment, just a moment, something akin to fear flickered in Marcus's eyes. Then the fury returned, doubled. "Do you think I care?" he growled, advancing. "Do you think I'm afraid to die?" He was 3 meters away from her now. "No," Sarah said, her posture not changing an inch, "but I think you're afraid of failing, of losing control, of being weak." Marcus stopped, his jaw locked. "Shut up. You lost your job," Sarah continued, her voice low but piercing. "You lost your football career because of drugs. You lost people's respect, and now you're losing your wife too. It must be terrifying to feel everything slipping through your fingers." "I told you to shut up!" Marcus lunged forward with astonishing speed, the knife slicing through the air toward Sarah's neck. But she wasn't there anymore. Sarah's body reacted before her conscious brain had fully processed the attack. Years of military training, hundreds of hours in hand-to-hand combat, countless simulations. It all converged in that 1.3-second moment. She pivoted to the left, her body rotating on the axis of her right foot. Marcus's knife passed inches from her shoulder, the displaced air touching her skin like a whisper of death. In the same fluid motion, Sarah grasped Marcus's outstretched wrist with both hands. Her fingers found the exact pressure points she had memorized, those tiny clusters of nerves that, when pressed correctly, caused debilitating pain regardless of the person's size or strength. Marcus roared in surprise and anger, trying to pull his arm back, but Sarah was already moving on to the next phase of the technique. Using Marcus's own momentum against him, she spun him under his outstretched arm, twisting his wrist at an unnatural angle. The knife fell to the floor with a metallic clink, but Marcus was too big, too strong, and too drug-crazed to be restrained by that alone. With an animalistic roar, he used his free arm to try and grab Sarah from behind. His enormous fingers brushed against her uniform. Sarah released his wrist and lowered herself completely, almost crouching. Marcus, unbalanced by his own momentum and the sudden lack of resistance, staggered forward. It was at that moment that Sarah executed the move she had learned from a Krav Maga instructor at Fort Bragg, an Israeli veteran who taught her that violence, when necessary, must be swift, precise, and utterly devastating. She leaped off the ground with explosive force, her right elbow rising in a perfect arc and connecting with surgical precision at the base of Marcus's jaw, where the trigeminal nerve is most exposed. The impact produced a dull, unpleasant sound. Marcus's eyes rolled back immediately. His massive body swayed like a tower about to collapse, but Sarah wasn't finished. As Marcus staggered, she turned his body and executed a leg sweep on the back of his knees, the same technique that took down soldiers carrying 40 kilograms of equipment in the Afghan desert. Marcus fell, not gracefully, not in slow motion like in the movies. He collapsed like a building being demolished, 2 meters and 13 centimeters of muscle, bone, and fury slamming onto the linoleum floor with an impact that made nearby furniture vibrate. Sarah was on top of him in a second, her knee pressed against his back, her hands already pinning his arms in a position that rendered any resistance futile. "Security guards!" she yelled. "Now!" The security guards, who were still conscious, rushed to help, bringing handcuffs and restraint straps. Together they restrained Marcus, who was still semi-conscious and disoriented. Sarah stood up slowly, her hands trembling slightly now that the adrenaline was beginning to wear off. She looked at her own hands, stained with the blood of the patient she had been treating earlier, dirty from the floor where she had rolled, scratched from the brief confrontation, but whole, functional, alive. "My God!" Daniel appeared beside him, his eyes wide. What did you... "This man is gigantic." Sarah didn't answer immediately. She was looking at Marcus, now restrained and being checked by other doctors. Despite everything he had done, she saw a sick man, a man whose brain was being fried by chemicals, a man who needed help as much as he needed to be stopped. "Prepare 50 milligrams of intravenous diazepam," she said clinically, switching back to medical mode, "and monitor his vital signs every 5 minutes. He will need improper sedation before the police can transport him." "Yes, doctor." Sarah walked back into the hallway, her legs suddenly feeling heavy. She leaned against the wall, closing her eyes and breathing deeply. "Dr. Mitchell." She opened her eyes. Jennifer, the receptionist, was standing in front of her, her eyes red from crying, but with an expression of absolute gratitude. "You saved my life," Jennifer whispered. Sarah shook her head. "I did my job, just like you did yours by not provoking him." "But how did you learn to do that?" Sarah was silent for a moment. Images of Afghanistan flashed in her mind. Explosions, screams, blood, lost comrades, enemies faced. 6 years of a life she tried every day to leave behind, but that never truly left her. "Military training," she finally said. "Combat medicine, when you work in war zones. You learn that sometimes healing people also means protecting them." 3 hours later, St. Mary's Hospital had returned to something close to normal. The police had arrived and removed Marcus Donovan, now stable but still under medical and police custody. He would face multiple charges: aggravated assault, trespassing, terrorist threat, illegal possession of a bladed weapon. Sarah was in her small office, filling out the incident report. Her hands no longer trembled, but she felt a deep fatigue in her bones. A knock on the door. "Come in," she said without looking up from the paperwork. The door opened, and a small woman entered, face swollen and bruised, ribs bandaged, but eyes firm and determined. Amanda Donovan, Marcus's wife. "Dr. Mitchell," Amanda said softly, "I needed to thank you in person." Sarah stood up immediately, her medical instincts assessing the patient. "You should be resting. Your ribs, they'll get better," Amanda interrupted gently. "Just like I will. For the first time in 7 years, I know I'm going to be okay." She took a step closer, their hands nervously intertwined. "I spent so much time thinking it was my fault," Amanda continued, her voice breaking slightly, "that if I were a better wife, more patient, more understanding, he would stop hitting me, he would stop terrorizing me. But tonight, when he came after me, when you stopped him, I realized something." "What?" Sarah asked gently. "It's not me who needs to change. It's him. And there are people in the world, people like you, who won't stand idly by while someone hurts someone else. Who will fight? Who will stand between the victim and the aggressor? Tears were streaming down Amanda's bruised face now, but she was smiling. You showed me that I can be strong too, that I can get out, that I can rebuild my life. Sarah felt a lump in her throat. She thought of all the people she had treated over the years, wounded soldiers, victims of domestic violence, survivors of unimaginable trauma. She had always believed that her role was to heal wounded bodies. But sometimes, she realized, the most important healing happened in places no scalpel could reach. You've always had this strength, Sarah finally said. I just gave you the safe space to recognize it. Later that morning, as the sun began to paint the Detroit sky with shades of orange and pink, Sarah was on the hospital terrace. She'd finished her shift but couldn't go home yet. Dr. Robert Chen, the director of the emergency room, joined her. You know this is going to be news, right? He said, offering her a cup of coffee. 6'2" doctor takes down. 6'2" attacker. The media will love it, Sarah grimaced. Great, exactly what I need. You did something extraordinary tonight, Sarah. I did what needed to be done. No, Robert corrected gently. You did what very few people would have the courage to do. You placed yourself between a violent man and defenseless people. And when violence became inevitable, you ended it in the most efficient and least harmful way possible. Sarah took a sip of her coffee, letting the warmth spread through her body. In Afghanistan, she said softly, we had a saying, the best fight is the one you avoid. The second best is the one you end quickly. And the worst one? The one you don't survive to tell the tale. They stood silent for a moment, watching the city awaken. Have you ever thought about going back? Robert asked. To active duty? Sarah shook her head. Every day I think about Afghanistan, about the friends I lost, about the patients I couldn't save. But go back? No, I'm better off here. Even after nights like this. Especially after nights like this, Sarah said firmly, because tonight reminded me that war isn't just in distant countries. It's in homes destroyed by domestic violence. It's in minds destroyed by drugs. It's in hearts broken by trauma and fear. She turned to Robert, her eyes gleaming with renewed determination. If I can use my training, all that time learning to survive and protect myself in combat zones, to make a difference here, then maybe everything I went through was worth it. Sarah was in her office when she received the envelope. There was no return address, only his name written in careful handwriting. Inside was a photograph, Amanda Donovan, smiling broadly, standing in front of a new apartment. Her face was healed without any marks. Her eyes shone with something Sarah recognized immediately, hope and a letter. Dr. Mitchell, I started therapy. I got a new job. I'm living alone for the first time in 8 years. Marcus is in a rehabilitation center for criminals with substance abuse problems. I don't know if he'll change. I don't know if I'll ever fully forgive him. But I know this. That night in the hospital, when you stood between me and the man who had hurt me for so many years, something inside me woke up. You showed me that size doesn't matter. Physical strength isn't everything. Courage, determination, and the refusal to accept violence, those are the things that truly make the difference. Thank you for saving me. Thank you for showing me that I could save myself. With eternal gratitude, Amanda. Sarah held the photo for a long moment, a smile playing on her lips. She thought of Marcus, 213 meters of fury and muscle. She thought of the fear he had inspired. She thought of how invincible he seemed, but in the end he fell. Not because Sarah was physically stronger, but because she had something he lacked at that moment. Clarity of purpose, precise training, and above all, an absolute refusal to allow violence to win. Size isn't everything. Strength isn't everything. Sometimes the shortest person in the room is the most powerful, not because of his muscles, but because of his courage.